this is a good day at work. Good morning, Driving.ca. I am Al Alder, and I've just pulled out of the front of the Porsche Museum in Stuttgart. I'm here today in what is one of the ultimate, if not the ultimate, G-Series 911. This is a pre-production 1985 Porsche 911 Carrera 3.2 Club Sport. This spiritual successor to the iconic RS 2.7 is G-Series at its best. Lighter weight, all the goodies, and stickers to boot. Oh boy, we've got a fun couple hours ahead of us here. So, before we get into the twisty stuff, just what do I mean when I say G-Series? Well, the Porsche 911, of course, has a long history, 60 years now, in fact. The G-Series generally refers to the second generation of these 911s. Generally identifiable by their little accordion bumpers down the front and rear, the G-Series modernized the car largely in suit with new American dictates on vehicle safety and especially air quality and emissions. Bumping up displacement to 3 and 3.2 liters, the G-Series modernized a lot of the engine control systems while still retaining a lot of the good old-fashioned character of the earlier cars. Granted, whether you see that as good old-fashioned or not is something of a matter of taste. I personally am quite fond of the old stuff, but there are certain quirks. One of the biggest is the fact that the second generation still carried forward the old-style 915 transmission. So of course, the real reason for driving it is, how does this car drive? Well, I can say, quite marvelously. That manual steering rack up front gives exactly the sort of feedback that I crave in a car. All the ingredients are here for this car to talk to you as clearly and efficiently as possible. It'll tell you what's up. You just have to read it right. Pedal feel? Excellent. That weird floor hinge clutch that always seems strange when you first climb into a 911? Well, you get used to it pretty fast. Brake pedal is really good and firm. It's not unassisted race car nasty, it's just hard in the right way. And then, of course, that noise! It's just so many of the best bits of driving, undiluted. Honestly, not feeling far off from what you would have experienced in one of the original Beetles, the 915 is a funny little gearbox. It notches and clunks into gear along this really tall gear lever. Let things a little out of adjustment, and things can feel really weird on these gearboxes, especially coming from the comfortable modern stuff. First gear engages with a really pleasant little notch. Second gear as well, just, oh, yes, that's the good. And each subsequent gear similarly crests into place with a certain mechanical resistance that just makes it really happy when it finally breaks that threshold. Gears 1 through 4 are in a typical H pattern, but without much definition between them. You just sort of have to know that that corner of the square is going to give you first, and that one's going to give you third. Then getting it into fifth requires pushing it through a little springy gate. That's why you see the little arrow there pictured on the gear map atop the lever. This gearbox was soon followed up by the famed G50. This Getrag unit is really well esteemed among enthusiasts, and in fact is what this car is supposed to have. You see, this 3.2 Club Sport is a pre-production car. Built in 1985, this car was on the road testing 2 years before the car actually debuted in '87. With that said, most of the rest of what's on this car is what customers got, and were they lucky customers? The 3.2 Club Sport was a properly focused driver's 911. We're looking at a removal of noise insulation, as you can probably, or at least hopefully, hear through my microphone right now. Porsche ditched the power window motors. There are no little headlight washers on this car. There is no signature 911 rear wiper on this thing. The AC is gone. The locks are manual. There is no option for a sunroof in this car. Heck, Porsche even removed the passenger sun visor and the little lights from the boot and engine compartment. Everything superfluous. There's no glove box either, and the little cubby doors that would usually be on those door-sized pockets, well, they're gone too. Through all of this, Porsche cut 50 kilograms from the car and 1/10 of a second from its acceleration time. That brought the car from 5.5 down to 5.4 seconds to 100 kilometers an hour. That's a pretty respectable number for the era. On top of that too, the engine got some special treatments. Though retaining the 3.2's traditional single overhead cam setup, the valves themselves were hollowed out to make them lighter and quicker to respond. Thanks to that, Porsche was able to remap the Motronic ECU to let this thing run a little faster. It now goes up to 6,800 RPM. Down at the bottom, there's no free-flowing sump to slosh back and forth like the oil reservoir gauge here either. No, this thing got dry sump. Then to top it all off, those series production cars with the G50 got a short shift as well. It's just so much fun. And this is before you get to the rest of the sports catalog. You get the fantastic Porsche Sport bucket seats here. My sides are so nicely hugged and so well supported. The Club Sports came standard with the Sport dampers. You get front and rear sway bars, which may sound like a funny thing to get excited about on a sports car, but back in the day, that was a big deal. I only just put a rear sway under the back of my 944, and let me tell you, it's transformed the thing. Later cars even got an even beefier anti-roll setup, and on top of that, they even moved from the original 15x6 and 7 Fuchs wheels to larger 16s with an 8-inch wide rear. This early car is actually running that wheel setup, and I am really glad that it is. This is a wet day with one of the most powerful 911s from this era, and of course the fact that this is an irreplaceable Porsche museum car. Putting down close to 250 horsepower through that also standard upgraded limited slip rear diff in the wet with the classic 911's tail heavy, tail happy character, I am glad to have all the traction I can get. Of course, this touches on one of the other very, very important details about these classic 911s, which is that they can be tricky to drive. Though today's 992 generations have engineered the platform to what feels near perfection, these old things, they were unrefined and they were temperamental. These cars will punish you if you mess up, and oh boy, am I cognizant of that. With all of its weight over the rear axle, the 911s are especially susceptible to what's referred to as lift-off oversteer. This can be a tricky condition and consideration if you enter a corner too hot, because if you let off the throttle, the car settles forward, the weight comes off of those rear tires with all of that mass ready to pendulum side to side at the rear. Makes it really easy to spin these cars around by doing what you think is cautious. As a result, these cars require a very delicate balance of throttle and brake input. You see, you want to make sure that you let enough weight fall onto those front tires that they actually track and pull you through the corner, but not so much that you unsettle the car altogether. Keep respectful and get a feel for it though, and my God, does it reward. It's like driving a typewriter. Now yes, of course this feels special. This is a special car, and they only built 312 production cars. But you see, the regular 911s of this era are excellent too, and that's really one of the best things about these old air-cooled cars. They are weird, they are tactile. This floor-hinged clutch always feels so strange and unfamiliar underfoot, and yet they're all so engaging. Just a few days before I flew here to Germany to drive this car, a friend took me out in his 1985 Targa. That car with the regular 3.2-liter flat six and with this goofy 915 transmission was in many ways just as delightful as this here Club Sport. Yes, I get to hear more of it. Yes, it's lighter, there's no back seat, it's impractical. And yet, even this sporting Focus Special could be entirely tractable as a daily driver. Yeah, you'd probably miss the comforts, the AC, the glove box. Even on these bigger wheels with less cushy sidewall, with stiffer suspension, without the conveniences, this is still a very comfortable, easygoing, friendly, accessible, approachable driver. With the electronic engine management, I didn't have to worry about choke when I started it up. I just turned the key and it fired. It's just that good, and that trickle down across the rest of the models, oh, does it make me happy. I'll be excited to get home to my little 944, but man, I'm just gonna keep savoring this Club Sport for now. For Driving.ca, I'm Al Alder. For more classic news, drives, stories, and all kinds of stuff, be sure to follow us online on Driving.ca and check out our socials as well. We're on Instagram and Twitter. I just brought this car over 40,000 kilometers. 40,001. Look at you! I got to do that! What the